The trade war has escalated into an all-out economic battlefield, and this time, China is not holding back. With the US imposing steep new tariffs, China has launched a counterstrike aimed directly at the heart of American industry. Beijing's response is not just about sending a message, it is a calculated economic weapon that could bring the US auto industry to its knees. By imposing crippling tariffs on American-made vehicles and critical auto parts, China is cutting off billions in revenue, making it nearly impossible for US automakers to compete in the global market. This is not merely a diplomatic spat, it is economic warfare. The stakes? Nothing less than the survival of an industry that has powered America for over a century. How severe is the situation? Which companies are about to take the biggest hit? Could this be the final blow that shifts global auto dominance to China forever? Let's break it all down. For decades, the United States has dominated the global automobile market, exporting vehicles and auto parts worldwide. Major manufacturers like Ford, General Motors, and Tesla have relied on international markets to fuel their growth, with China emerging as their most crucial battleground. However, a single move by China sent shockwaves through the industry. By imposing heavy tariffs on American-made cars and auto components, China effectively slammed the door shut on billions of dollars worth of exports. This was not a random decision, it was a calculated strike against a critical weak point in the American economy. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Shipments stalled, automakers scrambled to reassess supply chains, and the stock market spiraled downward as investors grasped the full impact of the trade escalation. This was not just another bump in the ongoing trade. For years, American automakers enjoyed unparalleled access to Chinese consumers. China had become the world's largest new car market, and companies like General Motors thrived, selling more vehicles in China than in the United States itself. Tesla, fresh off the success of its Shanghai Gigafactory, relied heavily on Chinese demand to expand its footprint. Ford and Chrysler, already struggling with challenges at home, leaned on China as a key pillar of their survival strategies. That access vanished overnight. Tariffs made American cars uncompetitive, forcing automakers to watch as their market share in China collapsed. Tesla, which had once been positioned to dominate the electric vehicle landscape in China, now faced restrictions that threatened its future in the region. Ford and Chrysler found themselves locked out of a market they had spent years cultivating, leaving them scrambling for alternatives. China's counterstrike did not stop at tariffs on finished vehicles. It went even deeper, targeting the global supply chain that American automakers relied upon. The US auto industry was more than just car manufacturers, it depended on an intricate network of suppliers, parts manufacturers, and raw material imports. China placed restrictions on the export of rare earth metals, which are essential for manufacturing electric vehicle batteries and semiconductors. Without these crucial materials, American automakers faced production delays, skyrocketing costs, and, in some cases, the inability to build vital components at all. The ripple effect reached far beyond automakers, hitting steel manufacturers, dealerships, and parts suppliers. Workers in states like Michigan and Ohio, already struggling with economic instability, suddenly faced the threat of mass layoffs and plant closures. The United Auto. The financial markets wasted no time punishing the auto sector. Stocks for major US automakers plummeted within hours of China's announcement, erasing billions in market value. Analysts downgraded their projections, issuing dire warnings about the future of the American auto industry. Foreign automakers, particularly those in Europe and Japan, seized the opportunity to capitalize on America's misfortune. With American brands locked out of China, their competitors stepped in to fill the void, solidifying their presence in the world's largest car market. As American companies struggled with trade restrictions and supply chain disruptions, global rivals strengthened their grip on a market that had once been a cornerstone of US economic power. This was not just a tit-for-tat trade dispute, China's counterstrike had a much larger goal. China had spent years aggressively developing its domestic electric vehicle industry, investing heavily in automakers like BYD and NIO. These companies were positioning themselves as global leaders in the future of transportation. By cutting off American automakers from the Chinese market and limiting their access to critical materials, China forced the United States to fall behind in the race for electric vehicle dominance. While American companies struggled to reconfigure supply chains, Chinese automakers surged ahead, strengthening their position in an industry that would define the future of transportation. The implications of China's move went beyond the auto industry. The US-China trade war had already been escalating, but this latest retaliation signaled a dangerous new phase. The automobile sector had long symbolized American industrial strength, and China's decision to strike at its core was nothing short of economic warfare. Diplomatic efforts scrambled to contain the damage, but the consequences were already unfolding. US allies watched with concern, realizing that China's move would have global repercussions. If the United States could not protect its auto industry from such an attack, what would happen to other sectors? The trade war was no longer about tariffs on steel or technology. It had evolved into a precise and devastating strategy to cripple industries essential to American economic dominance. With access to China's market cut off and production costs rising, American automakers faced a grim reality. Some companies explored moving production to other countries to bypass tariffs, but these shifts came with major logistical hurdles and long-term risks. Others looked for domestic solutions, hoping the US government would step in with subsidies or policies to offset the financial damage. For American consumers, the consequences hit just as hard. Vehicle prices soared as supply chain disruptions caused shortages and increased manufacturing costs. Dealerships struggled to sell cars, and financing options tightened as banks braced for economic uncertainty. The dream of car ownership, once a cornerstone of American prosperity, became more expensive than ever. In boardrooms across Detroit and Silicon Valley, executives scrambled to navigate an industry that had been thrown into chaos overnight. Expansion and innovation took a backseat as companies focused on survival and damage control. The fate of the US auto sector, from traditional gas-powered vehicles to the future of electric cars, now hung in the balance. Beyond the auto industry, China's move sent a clear message: economic warfare had entered a new era. Trade disputes were no longer broad battles over tariffs, but had evolved into precision strikes designed to cripple specific industries. The United States, once confident in its ability to dictate global trade rules, now found itself reacting to an attack it never saw coming. The full consequences of China's counterstrike would take time to unfold, but one thing was certain: the global auto industry had changed forever. What had started as a tariff dispute had escalated into a high-stakes economic battle with no clear resolution. America's auto industry, once a dominant force, now faced one of its greatest challenges yet. China's decision to impose severe tariffs on American-made cars and auto components was not a knee-jerk reaction. It was a calculated move designed to strike at one of the biggest vulnerabilities in the US economy. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Shipments of American vehicles to China stopped almost overnight. Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, which had long relied on the Chinese market to sustain profits, suddenly found themselves locked out. Even Tesla, which had bet big on its Shanghai Gigafactory, faced a crisis that put its future in jeopardy. For an industry that had invested billions into expansion in China, the tariffs were nothing short of a financial disaster. But China's attack went far beyond slapping tariffs on finished cars. It targeted the very lifeblood of the industry, the global supply chain. American automakers didn't just sell cars in China, they relied on Chinese materials to build them. And that's where the real damage was done. The modern auto industry depends on a web of suppliers and manufacturers stretching across multiple continents. One of the most critical links in that chain? Rare earth metals, materials essential for producing everything from electric vehicle batteries to semiconductors. China didn't just restrict US car exports. It cut off access to these vital resources. Without a steady supply of rare earth metals like neodymium and dysprosium, production lines in the United States began grinding to a halt. Companies scrambled to find new suppliers, but alternative sources, like Australia and Canada, lacked the scale and efficiency of Chinese operations. Establishing domestic production of these materials would take years, if not decades. The Biden administration had pushed for increased domestic mining of critical minerals, but those efforts had barely begun. Meanwhile, automakers faced the grim reality that they simply could not build cars without the raw materials they no longer had access to. Wall Street reacted with brutal efficiency. As soon as China announced its counterstrike, stocks for major American automakers plummeted. Ford, General Motors, and Tesla saw billions wiped from their market value in mere days. Analysts rushed to downgrade their projections, warning that U.S. automakers could be in for a prolonged downturn. Investors, once confident in the steady rise of electric vehicle production and overseas expansion, now saw the industry as a high-risk bet. Panic selling spread, with pension funds, mutual funds, and retirement accounts taking severe hits due to their exposure to auto stocks. The uncertainty sent shockwaves through the broader economy, forcing financial institutions to rethink their long-term outlooks. Foreign automakers, particularly those in Europe and Japan, wasted no time capitalizing on the crisis. With American brands suddenly locked out of China, their competitors swooped in to fill the gap. Volkswagen, Toyota, and Hyundai expanded their footprint in the Chinese market, securing deals and partnerships that further cemented their global dominance. The political fallout was just as severe as the economic one. President Donald Trump had championed aggressive tariffs as a way to protect American industries, promising that they would bring jobs back to the United States. But instead, the move had triggered a trade war that left the auto industry in ruins. Lawmakers from both parties scrambled to respond. Some called for an immediate reversal of the tariffs, fearing that continued escalation would only worsen the crisis. Others pushed for massive government intervention, bailouts, subsidies, and emergency funding to prop up struggling automakers. But the damage had already been done. China's strategy had not just been about economic retaliation. It was about shifting global power. By crippling the U.S. auto industry, China positioned itself as the leader in the next phase of automotive development. While American automakers struggled, Chinese car manufacturers surged ahead. Companies like BYD, NIO, and XPeng had already been gaining traction in the electric vehicle market. Now, with American brands weakened, they accelerated their international expansion. China had spent years investing in EV infrastructure, battery technology, and green energy policies. Now, the country's automakers had the perfect opportunity to dominate. They pushed into Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, forming partnerships and capturing market share that U.S. companies could no longer defend. As global demand for electric vehicles skyrocketed, China stood at the forefront of the industry, while the United States,